Okay, so this screencast is going to cover architectural features that differ between the Romanesque and the Gothic. So you can kind of see the progression of the ways that the architecture improved and how they did it. And then at the end of this screencast, I'm going to talk about the late medieval up into the proto-Renaissance in Italy for the historical context. So I'm kind of doing both since I couldn't fit the architecture in the last screencast. Okay, so to start off with, this is some diagrams of what's different between the architecture in Romanesque and Gothic. And I know you guys can obviously look at it and see the difference with the rounded arches for the Romanesque and then the pointed arches for the Gothic. But this diagram here kind of shows the same floor plan comparing the two arches or the two architectural features. So to start off with, we've got, the A, B, C, D. So A, B, C, D here with E in the center for both. Okay. And then we can see the height is H right here of the arch, and then we see the top of the vault up here with F, and same thing here, and it just takes it to a new level. So let's start off with, first of all, the diagonal ribs. That's what those are called. This area right there is called the transverse arch, and then we have arcade arches on this side of A, D, B, C. And then in a Romanesque arch, you can see that this arch here, the H, is higher than the arches on this side. Okay, so that makes it uneven in regards to how they can support this arch. Now, if you notice here, the height of the arches is the same. So L, K, and F, they're all hitting the same in regards to size. And that's very different than what we have here with the letters. So the Gothic is going to give flexibility. It channels the weight downward better, which requires less buttressing or less holding up from a support mechanism. And another thing that it does is it allows for the walls to be opened up for large windows, which we see with the beautiful stained glass in the Gothic cathedrals. It also makes the vaults appear larger, even though technically if you look at the space is the same in regards to how much distance it covers, but it looks much more large compared to the Romanesque. And then if you look up here, I just wanted to point out this, you could see the windows holding up the arch right here, but here you could see the transverse arch and how it hits the same height. Okay, for this one it shows you a progression of the different ones. So let's see, there down here on this one on the left is this is early Gothic going on to high Gothic. And so we have the first one we have is Leon, and you can see that the nave arcade is down here, and then a vaulted gallery, then the triforium, and then we have the clerestory windows, and those are called lancets right there. So it only really has room for one set of windows. Now, if you notice at the Notre Dame in Paris, this is an iconic Gothic cathedral that everyone who's gone to Paris has gone into the Notre Dame or seen it from the outside. So you have the lancets much higher. There are two sets of windows. Stained glass oculi replace the triforium. So those are the rose windows. And then we could just see how the progression moving on to Chartres Cathedral. Yes, that's how you pronounce it, Chartres. And you can see that these windows are higher up, and the lancets are also at a different level. So it's almost like flipping the plan from Notre Dame. And then we've got the church at Amiens, which is even taller. So you could see the progression of how from early Gothic to high Gothic, how much had changed. Okay, so going back to this one. So the weight wants to push down and out on the building. So flying buttresses allows for this weight to be supported without using super thick walls. So flying buttresses support structure is pulled outside the church, which allows for opening up the walls. It also allows for lots of windows. So you know a Gothic building when on the outside, when you see the Gothic, the flying buttresses. Okay. So over here again, we've got the clerestory, triforium, and arcade. And then here on the Gothic building blocks, look how thin these flying buttresses are and how it goes into another part of the building. And then so you could see kind of the inside. There's the nave. There's the clerestory, the tracery. This is the rose window. And then on the outside, we've got the buttress. Whereas in the Romanesque, we have the flying buttress is a much more substantial and much larger in order to take on that weight of the building. Okay, so in regards to other style and characteristics during this period, in regards to sculpture, there's a lot of sculpture on the church portals. As in Romanesque church facades, sculpted figures populate the exterior of Gothic churches on western main entrance and on as many as 6 transept entrances. The Virgin Mary plays a central role in sculpture, and that is, the Notre Dame means the Church of Our Lady. So, and there's many Notre Dames, by the way, but the one we think of is the one in Paris. And then one of the sculpture pieces I'm going to show you will show this hip shot position, or this S-shaped position. And it's where one hip juts out to form an S curve of the body. And we're seeing kind of this move back into being more naturalistic in regards to stance. It looks a little awkward when you see this hip shot position, but we're seeing the first steps to going back to using contrapposto that we're going to see return when we talk about the Renaissance. The body is going to be completely covered in heavy drapery. However, we'll be able to tell some of the body features underneath instead of being, very flat like it was during the Byzantine period or the early Christian period. Okay, so moving on to the historic context for the late medieval and proto-Renaissance in Italy, which will be chapter 14. If you notice, look at the Italian boot. Notice how many independent city-states there are. And oftentimes they are ruled by an oligarchy. But if you take a look at this, you could see here's Rome. And notice Rome is going to be controlled by what's called the Papal States. And notice kind of the region it covers here. And then in this green area is Florence. And Florence is going to play a pivotal role, not the only city that does, but it plays a pivotal role in the beginning of the Renaissance. Down here is the Kingdom of Naples, Sicily. We've got Genoa up here, the Duchy of Milan, and we also have the Republic of Venice. Venice will also play an important role in the Renaissance at different times. And then other areas of note is going to be Siena, which is down here, the Republic of Siena. And I'll talk about that one as well when we get into that. Okay, so the historic context behind Italy, or behind the beginnings of this Renaissance, is the merchants. We're going to see a shift in not just the church being patrons of art, but we're going to see the wealthy merchants gain power And as they do that, they're going to become patrons of the arts to show off their power and to hold their wealth. So that's something that's going to be a little bit different during this time period. Um, Italy, or the Italian peninsula, is going to be this center for trade, just like it was when we talked about the ancient times. But once again, it becomes this bridge between East and West. And so the Italian peninsula becomes this hub of trade, and it's going to make this area very, very rich. And because they have money, they're going to, we'll see them wanting to show it off. Another important thing about this time period are the artisan guilds. Artisan guilds are organized by occupation, and they began to supervise the education of children through the apprenticeship program or system. And so when the child reaches a certain age, if a family could allow it, they would be apprenticed to a certain guild. And they're going to exert a lot of quality control among the members. Admission into the guild came after an examination of what's called a masterpiece. Yes, a masterpiece, which is a piece fine enough to be created by a master. So that's where we get the term masterpiece. The guilds are important because it provides social services to the members, including care for the sick and funerals for the deceased. Each guild had a patron saint. They maintained a chapel, participated in religious and civic functions and festivals, and they're also going to be responsible for commissioning some of the art that happens during this time period. The major guilds is going to be the cloth finishers, wool merchants, silk manufacturers, pharmacists, and doctors. Now it's interesting because painters often belong to the pharmacist guild. And I know that seems odd because what does painting have in common with pharmacists? Well, the reason why is because in order to create pigment, you needed to use mortar and pestles, and you needed to be familiar with chemicals that would create those pigments. So that's one of the reasons why they belong to that guild. Also, metal sculptors had their own guild, so did wood and stone sculptors. Okay, so another change we see during this time period is literature. Literature began to be written in the common spoken Italian language. That's called vernacular. Prior to that, all of the literature was written in Latin, and at this point, most people didn't speak Latin on a daily basis. They only heard it in church. And so by changing this and shifting this to the vernacular, it increased access to the written works, and that's going to be important when when we talk about, you guys have probably learned about Dante's Inferno. Dante is going to be one of the main writers that makes this shift from writing in Latin to writing in the vernacular, and that's going to allow for more people to be more literate and allow for people to have access to more information because it's now all going to be written in a language that they understand. Okay, the rest of the historical context I'll cover in our next unit when we get to the Renaissance. So we'll talk about Renaissance humanism, and then we'll talk about how the Great Famine or the Great Plague is going to affect the development of the Renaissance. Okay, that's it.